let's come to the cost distribution. So we have distributed our total cost into three different categories. First one is the manufacturing cost, second one is the assembly cost, and third one is the OEM cost. Let's see one by one. First one is in-house manufacturing cost, second one is outsourced parts, and third one is the miscellaneous parts. So in-house manufacturing cost is the whatever parts you have manufactured in your own workshop, just like brake pedals, some mountings that you have manufactured in your own workshop. So the cost of these parts will come under the in-house manufacturing cost. Second one is the outsourced manufacturing parts. The parts that we have purchased through the vendors means you have manufactured through the vendors. Just like there are some parts you have designed by yourself and get it done with the help of the vendors. So vendor will manufacture the part. The catch is that when you go to the vendors, so what are the points you have discussed? What are the technical things that you discussed with the vendors that we need? Also the bills from the vendors. So this is the essential part of the outsourced manufacture parts. And third one is the miscellaneous. Whatever the parts that required to manufacture the chassis or the auxiliary, you can see the auxiliary parts, just like fixtures, also pull push rod, your chassis stand. So these are the parts will come under the miscellaneous parts. And so let's come to the assembly cost. The assembly cost, the, there are some systems like steering, again brakes. There are some different assemblies, sub assemblies. You have to assemble it. So what happens? Team just miss out to fill the iteration that they have made. It is not like that you have manufactured the steering system and assembled it in your cart and come to the race. You have to iterate it 2 to 3 times to get the perfect result, right? So the cost of this iteration will come under the assembly cost. So that is what we are expecting in the assembly cost. The third one is the OEM cost. OEM cost, the parts that were directly manufactured through the vendors, like from the outlets, like nut bolts, some FRP material, seat, again. So these are the parts that comes under the OEM cost. And I will give you one example of in-house manufacturing part. Let's say you can see there is a chassis. So we know to fabricate the chassis, we require tons of processes like welding, grinding, cutting, etc. So you don't know about when you give the single cut, you don't know about the what price, what is the cost of per cut, what is the cost of per spot, or what is the cost of run welding. So there is different cost made up and one process cost calculator that you can see right here. You can find it in a template also. Also, there is a chart. If you don't want to use the calculator, you just go through the chart and calculate it on your own. So that's not an issue. Okay. So for example, you can see the chassis. So let's do the costing of the this chassis very briefly. So you can see that there is quantity one. Always there is a chassis for chassis quantity one. So whatever the material that is AISR 4130. So let's give the weight 10.59. Again, if you are doing the costing for the single chassis and there are multiple processes like TIG welding, grinding, drilling, cutting. So you just have to give the material cost once, not every time you have to give the material cost because the material cost is not changing. So it remains constant. So let's take the example of the welding. To complete the welding of the chassis, you, uh, you have spent some time. So depend upon the time, the labor cost is going to be calculated. There is a formula behind it. So you just have to give the approximate timing that you have spent on the welding for the chassis. Let's take an example of chassis. So you can see that there is a chassis. There's quantity one. The quantity will be always one. The material is for whatever you are using. Let's give some net weight and material cost. So here, okay, just look out here. When there are multiple process on a single component, you can see that there is welding, grinding, drilling, cutting. So there are lots of process, but not every time you have to give the material cost for the same component. You just have to give it once. Okay. Again, there is a process time. Process time means the whatever time you have spent to complete weld this chassis. So this time is your process time. We are not like we don't want exact timing. We just want approximate time. It will reflect that you have. Again, there is a process cost by using the process cost calculator or this chart. You could calculate the process cost. In this way, you could do the costing for the in-house manufacturing. So outsourcing process cost. Okay, as we discussed, outsourcing is the manufacture of parts from the vendors, right? So the questions you can expect from us that what kind of market survey you have done, what kind of cost validation you have done means again what are the negotiation point with your vendors and the verification of product, right? So in this way your knowledge as well as your expertise will reflect through this template and the bill should be provided to validate the price. So what should we expect from the OEM cost? Okay, let's discuss about it. First one, the parts that you are purchasing from the vendors should meet with your desired specifications, whatever your cart belongs to that. Don't purchase the parts that won't fit in your cart, right? So just go through the specification first, then purchase the part. Again, there's a test report validation. So why the test report validations are important? Sometimes what happens, you just purchase some material from the vendors and trust them blindly. But it's not like that. Sometimes what happens, the vendors will provide you the faulty material and you can't determine whether it's faulty or not because all the materials you just have to look out for all the compositions whether it's correct or not. And next one is benchmarking. Benchmarking concept that, as we have earlier discussed, that you have to compare between the 2 to 3 processes. Also, you have to compare 2 to 3 manufacturer parts. So that's why the benchmarking is also important. The knowledge of different standards. There are, for example, let's take an example of the bolts and nut and bolts. There are lots of grades available for the nuts and bolts. So you should have some knowledge of the different standards. So these are the important factors in OEM cost. So in the cost report, thank you all of you. All the best for your upcoming event and do prepare well. Thank you.